Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you let us know if there's any problems with the sound? You should be able to hear us now. So just type in the comments box in case you can't hear us. Just give us a thumbs up or something if the sound's okay. We're just checking that everyone's signed in all right. Thanks so much if you've already put your names in the comments box. It just helps us to find out exactly who's here. Perfect. It looks like everyone can hear us. Fantastic. So you should be able to. Hopefully you can. We'll try and speak nice and loudly. And I hope it's not too echoey. Perfect. We'll give it just 3 minutes because we said we'd start at 5 o'clock. Sorry for the mix-up with the links. We couldn't get the previous link to work. So hopefully most people have found this one. If you know of anyone else on any WhatsApp groups or anything like that, then just let us know that, let them know where we are and that we're on this new link now, and then we'll get started in a moment. Thanks so much, everybody. So just so that you know, the YouTube video will be recorded because there's a few people that can't join us live. And so any comments and things like that will stay on the YouTube video. So make sure that you're not mentioning any kind of personal details that you don't want out there, because obviously other people can view this later. So just make sure that you're happy that any comments that you put down, you're happy to share with people. So try not to mention specific school names or anything like that. You can always email us separately if you've got any particular comments. But hi, everybody. Okay, perfect. So we'll give it 2 more minutes. Hopefully everybody has their interview preparation handbook. We sent out a digital version, so we'll be referring to that throughout this, and we'll send it again in the follow-up email afterwards. I'll send you a link of this as well, because you might want to rewatch this before you've got any Skype interviews. Perfect. I'm just checking that everyone can hear all right. It looks like, yeah, it looks like everybody can. Lovely, and we'll give it just 2 more minutes. So if anyone needs to go and get themselves a cup of tea or a drink of water, you've got 2 minutes, and then we'll start properly and just give everyone time to get here. Perfect. If anyone hasn't already signed up to the Facebook group, that's somewhere really helpful as well. I'm going to post these YouTube links into the Facebook group so that everyone can see them. We're going to be posting things every day on there to try and help out with your interview preparation, with your moving to England. I think Alex has already posted some things on there about finding accommodation for those of you who are in the process of hopefully getting your perfect job sorted out. But do sign up to that Facebook group, because we'll be putting everything on there. And it's probably the quickest way to get notifications about stuff. And like I said, you can always email us as well. Lovely. Okay, looks like we've got most people here. Excellent. And everyone can hear all right. I guess we'll probably get started. We've got 1 minute, but if we just do quick introductions, you probably know our faces already from our photos that we sent out. But just now that most people are here and signed in, we'll just introduce ourselves.
I'm Alex. Hello.
Hi, I'm Ellen. Nice to meet you all.
I'm Josh.
And we work together at Prospero as the support team, working very closely with everybody involved with the SVTP project this year. And we're going to be supporting you with everything involving relocating to England, teaching in your new schools. And obviously today we're talking about the interview process, which is the first step on your journeys as part of the SVTP. And we're going to be there for you every step of the way. So pleased to meet you. This is webinar 1 of 3. So the topic today is interview techniques and thinking about how you can be prepared and as successful as possible when you have eventually you have your interviews. Some of you may have them booked in already and scheduled. Others may still be waiting to hear from Randstad to see when this will occur. But we're going to give you lots of tips and advice, which will go alongside the handbook as well to help you out with that. A little bit later on down the line, we'll have 2 more webinars. One on moving to England and a third on teaching MFL in an English school.
Okay, so as we said before, all the webinars will go online and will be shared on the Facebook group and the e-portal for you to refer back to throughout entirety of the summer and throughout your placement as well. So again, this is a public forum, so all your comments that you're posting on there are in a public forum now. So please make sure that you don't use any school-specific names, any student details, anything that could identify anyone else, really, and make sure you're very careful about what you say. But feel free to ask us questions throughout the whole webinar. We can see the comments box here, so we'll try and type up some replies to you as and when we go, and we'll stop and answer your questions verbally as well. But there is also a section for question and answers at the end if you have anything specific that doesn't necessarily relate to exactly what's happening in the video at that time.
Perfect. So I think because we've got most people here that we were expecting to join us live, we'll start talking about specifics for preparing for your Skype interviews. So obviously there are certain things to prepare for the actual school interview itself, but also the fact that you're doing these interviews over Skype. So just like we've just done, it's a good idea to check that all of your technology is going to work perfectly first time. Have a bit of a practice so that if you do have any problems, you can come up with some solutions to that. Sometimes the internet connection isn't very good, so you might want to check that beforehand. Make sure that people can hear you like we've just done before you start giving any long interview answers and things like that. So make sure your technology is working first of all. Double check your all of your kind of preparation for your school as well. So when you're thinking about preparing for your Skype interview, you want to be looking at specifics about your school, looking through all of the information that you can find on the internet and also from Randstad about that school itself. So you can look at the Ofsted report, which will be the very official document that will grade the school based on a number of criteria. But don't just look at the Ofsted report because that's just a snapshot of the school on one day. So you can look through that, look for some useful comments, see if they mention the languages department in the Ofsted report, that would be useful. You can look at the school's website as well. Often school websites will have sections for the different subjects. They'll tell you about the recent results. You'll be able to see GCSE and A-level results, or you'd be able to see if it's a primary setting that you're working in. You might be able to see other results on there as well. You might be able to see what they've been doing recently with their SATs exams that are going to be coming up soon. So same thing for primary. You should also be able to see quite a bit about their languages curriculum on their website, or you can ask Randstad about that too. So they should be able to give you a bit more information about the department you will be working in. Try and get specifics about that certain school rather than just England in general, because as we'll come on to later, it's good to know details so that you can show the head teacher that you're excited about working in their school, not just in general in England. You want to make sure as well that you've had a look on their website for their policies, because then you can see what's going to be expected of you as a teacher. It's a good idea to get those things looked at before you accept any position, because you want to know exactly what they will expect of you, and then you can bring up those policies in the interview when you're giving your answers. Have a look at the teaching standards. We've sent those out in our handbooks, and there's lots of really useful information in the handbooks we've sent, not just the interview preparation handbook, but also the teacher handbook as well, because that's got information about teaching in England, the curriculum, exams, things that you might be expected to know for a Skype interview. So that's the kind of level of understanding they'll expect from you. So have a look through it, make sure you do understand those, and come to us if you want anything explained, you want to check anything, or you just need a bit of support with preparing for some interview questions. That's totally fine as well. And Randstad can help you with that too, because they know the school very well. And finally, just make sure that you have some questions for the school. Normally, at the end of the interview, the head teacher or whoever is interviewing you, they will give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you've got. But you might have hundreds of questions and you don't want to take too long asking them all. So try and get 2 or 3 really key questions prepared and ready for that interview so that you can find out what you need to know about the school without being cut off because it's taking too long. So that's some general interview preparation advice. And I believe Alex is going to go on to some Skype-specific things.
Sure, thanks, Ellen. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to present yourself for your interview. You will all have had an interview before. You'll all have experience of interviews for the schools that you're currently working in and also throughout your past experience. But for these interviews, it's quite likely that the interview will be conducted over Skype, over webcam, which is a little bit different. It takes a little bit of getting used to. So it's something we really need to think about so you're not caught out when it comes to logging in on the day and you're meeting the head teacher and you're speaking to the staff at the school. So just like a normal interview, it's really important to, of course, be very enthusiastic, to smile and to make eye contact. Now, you're not going to be looking directly into the eyes of the interviewer on the screen, but if you're looking into your webcam, it creates the same effect. Now, it's easier said than done because everybody feels a little bit self-conscious over Skype or over a webcam. The three of us here now can see ourselves. It's slightly off-putting. We're slowly getting used to it, but it can make you feel a little bit self-conscious in a way that you wouldn't do if you were physically in the room with the interviewer. So it's really important that you have a little bit of a play around with your laptop, your iPad, whatever you're going to use for your Skype interview. So make sure you feel comfortable with it. So we really recommend having a chat with a friend, testing out the software, getting used to how you look on the camera, making sure that you think about your internet connection, background noise, making sure that you've got a quiet, safe environment, thinking about what's in the background. If you've got Justin Bieber posters on the wall, you might want to angle it so that they can't be seen. Because you want to minimize any distractions that could put you off during the interview to make sure that you can be completely focused on the conversation that you're having. So again, as I mentioned, practicing with a friend is really important. Have a think about your account, make sure you've got a sensible username set up. I think Ellen's old username was Pink Princess 2000, Josh, you had Cool Dude 88, which just might look a little bit strange to a head teacher that's meeting you for the first time. So just make sure it's something sensible, just your full name for your Skype username is the best thing to use. And of course, although they're only going to see the top half of you, still need to dress appropriately and smartly because it is still an interview and you're still making a first impression to the people at the school that are meeting you. So a smart shirt, a tie, a smart top, making sure that your shoulders are covered, and that you're wearing trousers as well, just in case you do have to stand up. It's always a good idea. Okay, so just make sure you're all thinking really carefully. It's going to be a Skype interview. You're going to be using the internet connection. You're going to be seeing yourself on the screen. So just have a little bit of a play around, have a practice, make sure that that's not something that's going to distract you on the day. So that's a bit of information about Skype specific interview advice and how to present yourself. Josh is going to talk to you about some more general interview advice to think about before the day.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to pick up on a couple of comments before I do that. So yes, Gabriella, some schools have already started interviewing. Schools will want to start interviewing now, ready to place teachers for September. So that's why we do this webinar now, to make sure that you're all prepared for those interviews. Thank you to all helping one another out to sort out the sound. Well done. You're working great as a team already. And Amalia, don't worry if you don't have a Facebook account. We have the e-portal, and we're also setting up a Schoology page where we can share teaching resources with you as well. So you don't need, as long as you've got an email, we can share all our resources with you anyway. So don't worry about that. General interview advice. This is interview advice we give to any MFL teacher here in the UK. So firstly, be prepared to introduce yourself. Have a brief summary about your experience, your teaching, your enthusiasm for developing your pedagogy in England. So based on the experience you already have, why you're looking forward to now teaching and improving your teaching in England. Now we need to think about what the head teacher is going to be looking for. So head teachers will be looking for the following things. They'll want you to be talking about the pupils, okay? They'll want your answer to be pupil-centric, because at the end of the day, they care about their pupils and their progress. So you want to be mentoring student success, student progress, student learning, and developing those positive relationships with the students. Notice how many times I said students there, okay? Then they want you to think about being creative and developing and adapting and learning. Some schools have specific ways of doing things, which you'll need to learn and adapt to. Other schools may be very similar to the ways you already know about how to teach. So you need to be ready to be adaptive, flexible, and develop your own pedagogy going forward. Think about what you can bring to the role with some examples and your individuality. Have you run a club in the past? Do you have a specialism within MFL that you can really bring to the foreground? This is all part of your educational philosophy, your introduction of what you can bring to the school. Remember, at the end of the day, you are still trying to sell yourself, okay? You want to back up all of this with examples of your past success. So, when have pupils you've taught made exceptional progress? When have students really loved a lesson you've taught? And the key thing to back these up with is evidence. So if your students made great progress, what were their grades? Do you have a percentage to hand? If students did a really good lesson, what did you do that made that lesson so good? It's okay saying all of these things, but the head teacher may ask you to say, well, what grades did they get? What did you do that made that lesson so good? Try and think about some of those examples that you can back up what you're saying with some evidence. Don't worry if you can't think of that evidence. It is good enough that you know those things and you're able to do those things, but if you do have that evidence, that will make your interview even stronger. Finally, remember that you are employed as a full class teacher. The school needs to be confident that you can fill those expectations of having a teaching timetable across different year groups, maybe for some of you, for most of you if you're teaching secondary, and maybe fulfilling other duties around the school as well. So they may ask you follow-up questions about things you don't necessarily know about. Be prepared for follow-up questions. If you think you've answered the question, they may say, oh, can you actually talk to me about this? Or you mentioned this, can you explain that a bit more? So don't worry if they do ask you follow-up questions. It's normally a good sign that they actually want to hear more from you, okay? But be prepared for those follow-up questions to actually happen. And then one specific note that we've got here for MFL teachers is if you are teaching another language, so either French or German as well as Spanish, they may ask to have a small conversation with you in that target language. If they've got the head of MFL or another MFL teacher there, or the head teacher themselves is a linguist. Okay, so they may ask you to have a quick conversation in the other language just to check your proficiency, but that shouldn't be anything too troublesome for you lot.
Great, thanks Josh. So in a moment, we're going to give you lots of examples of questions and answers that may come up in your interview. And we're going to do a little bit of role play. The three of us are going to play some roles. We're going to do a pretend interview, and we're going to imagine that it's happening over Skype as well. And you're going to hear some examples of questions that are likely to come up in your interview. Now, you may not hear the exact questions, of course, that we use today, but it's likely that you'll hear a question from one of 4 key areas, which we're going to use in our 4 questions this evening. So the first is to do with your lesson style. So head teachers will really want to get a feel for the environment in your classroom, what your lesson might be like, because they're not going to be able to observe you physically. They're going to want to ask you about behaviour management. So that's the second key area, which you're likely to talk about with your head teacher. They'll want to hear about your interest in the school and what you can bring to the role. So that's the third key area. And safeguarding is a massive one that is definitely going to come up. They're going to want to hear that you have an up-to-date knowledge of current safeguarding practice within schools today. Ellen, you're going to talk to us about our roles.
So as Alex has just said, we're going to do a pretend interview so that you guys can be the audience and you can listen out for the head teacher who's going to be asking certain questions, and they'll be similar to what you can expect. And our teacher is going to be Josh today. Josh is going to be answering in 2 different ways. Very importantly, the first answer that Josh gives each time is going to be an example of poor practice. So the first time that Josh gives an answer, Josh is going to be giving the type of answer that we've had negative feedback about previously. It's going to be a bit of a parody of it. Obviously, we know that you're not going to be giving answers like this, but we just want to pick out certain things that we don't want you to fall into the trap of. And then we'll be giving the good version of the answer afterwards. And I'm sure that all of you lovely people would be giving those answers anyway. But again, it's just to highlight what head teachers want to hear and some things that could put them off. Okay, so I don't have a role, so I'm going to be the narrator for this. So we're going to hear the interview and I'm going to jump in with some comments. If you guys would like to make any comments, do go ahead. And I'll try and read those. My eyesight's not very good, but I'll try and read those comments as we're going. So Alex is going to start us off. And as I said, Josh's first answer is not how to do it. It is going to be poor practice first. Okay, so don't learn any lessons from Josh.
Okay. Hello, Josh. Thank you for joining us today. I'm the head teacher here at this school that I love being a part of. And obviously, we're speaking over Skype, so I can't see you teach. I can't get a feel for the environment in your classroom. And I would really like to know what it's going to be like for my pupils when you are their teacher. So if I walked into one of your lessons, a typical lesson, could you describe that for me, please? What would I see?
Okay, so my job is to be the teacher. So the students would be sitting quietly or silently, and I would be teaching them. So I would be explaining vocabulary and grammar. It's quite hard. So I will need to do lots of explaining from the front of the classroom while students learn. I might use some textbooks.
So, sorry, how would you gauge the success of students throughout this lesson? If it's, I can hear lots of you explaining difficult concepts to the students, but how would you know if they were being successful, if they were understanding the learning that you were tackling during that lesson?
Well, that's really impossible to do during the lesson when you've got 30 students. So I will write a test, write an assessment for them to do at the end of the term, and that will tell me whether they've understood what I was teaching or not.
Okay, so you'll be assessing them at the end of a half term. Just within this one lesson, though, that I walk into, how would you ensure that the students stay engaged and focused on the task from that specific lesson?
Well, I've only taught really sensible and nice classes so far, and I've never had any of those issues before, because they know that I'm the expert in the room and they respect me as the teacher.
I see.
Okay, so I'll do a little bit of commentary about Josh's answer there. So there were some useful things in there. Josh was explaining to the head teacher kind of what his lessons were like and the sorts of resources and things like that. But if you notice, there really wasn't much from Josh about what the students were doing. Josh explained that he would be leading the lesson, that he is the authority figure, and it's good to have that authoritative presence in the classroom. But Alex, as our head teacher, was asking Josh, what are the students doing? And actually, Alex asked 2 follow-up questions about how do you know the students are being successful, and what will you do to make sure the students are engaged? But Josh wasn't really telling Alex much about those students. He was more focusing on him as a teacher. And some of Josh's answers were a little bit negative. If you heard Alex ask Josh about how would you check within the lesson if the students were successful, Josh's response was, that's not possible. But that's kind of a negative response to a question by the head teacher. So if you do have anything like that, the first thing to remember in all of these questions is be positive. You don't want to let anything come out of your mouth as an answer that could be a negative response. Try and keep your answers really positive. Even if you've not tried something before, be open to trying those things. Now, Alex wants to know what the students are doing in the lesson because he's the head teacher. So your interviewer really cares about their children in the school. The interviewer's job is to make sure that you are a great candidate and that you're going to come to their school and teach their students really, really well. And that's their main concern. So their main concern is not necessarily about what you're doing in the lesson. It's about what are the students doing to learn the language? How are the students learning that language? And that's what Alex's follow-up questions are about, but Josh wasn't really painting a picture for him. So it's really, really key that before you do any Skype interviews or before you do more Skype interviews, that you make sure that you've got some examples of what students actually do in your lessons to learn. Because obviously, we can't just have the children sitting and listening. They've got to do practice, they have to do oral practice, they have to do listening practice. So what kind of activities do you use? Do you watch videos and do listening practice? Do you write postcards to pen pals? Just some examples of activities that you've used in the past that have been useful, and try and get those into your answer, because that's the kind of thing the head teacher wants to hear about, the actual things the students are doing. Okay, lovely. I think that we're going to go on to the next question. The next answer, and Josh is going to give a more positive answer this time, and he's going to try and talk about what the students are doing in the classroom and just give you a better idea about the sorts of phrases and things that you could use if this was your question. So Alex is going to ask the same question again. This time we're going to give some, hopefully, more positive responses from Josh.
Hello, Josh. So if I walked into your lesson, what would I be likely to see?
Okay, so if you just come into my lesson after the start, you'd see a lot of student engagement and you'd see some good pace. That would be really evident in the lesson. Students would probably be moving on from a starter activity that they'd done as they just walked into the classroom to get them engaged straight away. And then I would introduce the key learning objectives for the lesson, so students knew what they were aiming for throughout the course of the lesson. They would then, as I was delivering them some new content, maybe revising something from the last lesson, they would use prompts and questions and quizzing to make sure that they understood what the new content was. And then I'd use lots of rewards and praise to get them focused on some activities. That could be reading, writing, partner work, if it's oral or listening, anything like that, to really motivate them and create like a positive learning environment. And then to make sure that I knew that they were succeeding, I do lots of little pit stops throughout the lesson, and I'd circulate the classroom to assess that they're learning and to make sure that I could support students that needed it, challenge students that needed pushing a bit further. And then if you came in towards the end of the lesson, you definitely see me doing a plenary, something to check that the whole class had reached the learning objectives at the end of that lesson.
Fantastic, great. Okay, I much prefer Josh's second answer there because because he painted a really comprehensive, a really clear picture of what it would actually be like for a pupil in his lesson. I could hear that there would be a really strong structure, that there would be lots of pace, and there were loads of different activities that he described there that I could hear that the pupils and students would actually be doing. There wasn't a lecture feel in what he described there. There weren't students sitting and listening and not actually actively engaged in their learning. I could hear about lots of different things happening in a positive environment. He mentioned he uses lots of praise, that he uses lots of encouragement, which is a really important thing. We want to hear that our students are being encouraged. I also heard that he sounded confident in knowing that his students were being successful. He mentioned he would be checking, he would be giving quizzes, he would be doing follow-up questions with his students. These are examples of assessment for learning happening within the lesson, so AFL, which is a really good technique to use so that you know the flow of your lesson. Do the students need extra challenge? Do they need more support? Does the learning need to be slowed down or sped up or changed or adapted? It sounded like a really confident answer there from Josh, so I would give that one a thumbs up.
Awesome. So that's the first of our 4 questions, but like Alex said, these are really common questions. These are probably the 4 most common areas. So do make sure that you prepare for them. To be honest, there's always something about describing a lesson, because in the UK, it's really common for head teachers or heads of department to observe a whole lesson if you're interviewing for a job. Obviously, they can't observe you guys because most of you are in Spain, so that's not going to work. So they will want to hear all about your lessons, because it's usual practice for an interviewer to see the teacher teaching during the interview process. So they'll want a good explanation. They'll want quite a few examples like Josh gave. So Alex is going to give our next very common question now.
Question number 2. Okay. In my school, Josh, some students do find MFL quite a challenging subject, if I'm honest. And quite often when there's a new teacher, students can be quite unsettled. So I would like to know, how would you manage some low-level disruption may occur in one of your early lessons? For example, persistent chatting, or if you found the students quite difficult to settle down onto a task initially, how would you manage low-level disruption in your classroom?
Well, if students were being disrupted in my classroom, I would give out detentions, and I would contact home to talk to the parents, because it's the students and the parents' responsibility for the children to be sensible and polite and demand, give me the respect I deserve. I will be coming to England to share my culture, and your Ofsted says that you have good behaviour, so I don't think that's going to be an issue, is it?
I see. Well, at our school, we think it's really important that you plan for good behaviour, and that it's part of your thinking when you're approaching your lesson planning. Let's say you had a lesson where behaviour didn't quite go as you would have liked it. It wasn't quite the best behaved lesson from the students, and you were giving lots of detentions. What would your approach be in the next lesson, the next time you met with that class?
I think I would probably write their names on the board, write their names on the whiteboard or the blackboard, so that they can see they've been bad, they know they've been bad, the rest of the class knows what bad behaviour looks like, and making sure I'm always louder than they are, so that they know that I'm the one in charge of the room, this is my classroom, I'm the teacher, I demand that respect.
I see, okay, thank you.
Okay, so another not so good practice, please don't give that as your answer. So I know that you guys obviously won't be giving answers like this, but again, it's just to demonstrate a few of the things that we've heard head teachers say in the past. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right, Maria. Oh my God.
Yes. So as we said, obviously you guys won't be saying these things, but we're just picking up on all the bits that head teachers tell us. We don't want to hear this, we don't want to hear that. So the specific things that we want to highlight is that answer was very negative. There was not, again, it wasn't a very positive answers. It wasn't drawing on helpful things that teacher could do. Of course, sometimes you'll have to give detentions, and of course, sometimes you may have to contact home. But in an interview situation, you want to reassure the head teacher that most of the time, your lessons won't need detentions and they won't need phone calls home. So the head teacher doesn't want to know really about the things you do when there's bad behaviour. They want to know the things that you do to deal with it when it's low, before you have to then give detentions and things. How do you stop that from getting worse? How do you deal with it in the moment? Okay, and that keeps it really positive then. So if you're talking about all the positive things you can do when the students are being a bit chatty, or when there's, they're being a bit more difficult to settle, it keeps your answer really enthusiastic. It stops you from saying negative things, about detentions and calling home, and it just keeps the tone a bit more positive for the whole interview. So bearing that in mind, Josh, we're going to try again with take 2 of your behaviour answer. And this time what we're going to be looking for is, like I said, more proactive steps that Josh can take before he has to give detentions. What steps is he taking? The smaller steps before that point. So Alex is going to ask it again.
Okay, attempt number 2. Josh, how do you manage low-level disruption in your classroom? We're talking about poor behaviour. How would you make sure that you had a positive atmosphere in your classroom?
Okay, well, firstly, I try to plan engaging lessons so the students aren't bored, and I ensure lots of pace in my lessons so students don't have time to misbehave, and I plan transitions between activities well. But I also like to have a very positive classroom environment, so making sure I provide lots of opportunities for success, lots of short, easy questions that students can immediately get lots of praise and reward for to boost up their confidence, because some of them do find MFL quite tricky. But then obviously planning going forward, if there is some misbehaviour, I try and deal with it there and then through some routines that they would know. So maybe a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or some non-verbal. So maybe a stare that they know means that they need to be quiet, or maybe just moving towards them so they know that I'm aware that they're talking, because I can't have them talking when I am. But also think about seating plans. I may need to change them going forward and be flexible to minimise disruption in terms of where certain groups of students are sat. Ultimately, to try and maintain a positive, calm learning environment full of lots of praise. Obviously, if students weren't responding to this appropriately, I would follow the school policy, whatever your school policy may be for escalation, whatever was necessary to ensure that those students don't continue to disrupt the learning of the other students in the class.
Great, thank you, Josh. So I really liked Josh's second answer there. As a head teacher, it filled me with confidence that he is going to be a confident practitioner in the classroom. He's going to be a strong but positive presence. Okay, I don't get the impression from that answer that he's going to be a teacher that's going to be knocking on my door week 2 saying he can't cope, the students are running all over him, and he's running out of options. He's given detentions and he's losing options. He sounds like somebody who has a plan in place for how he creates a successful, calm, and well-behaved environment. He talked about the strategies that he used, and there was lots of praise and positive verbal communication that he mentioned. He also talked a lot about his non-verbal communication, so his eye contact, his positioning, the positioning of the students with the seating plan. So he's really thinking about those trigger points which can cause low-level behaviour, and he's anticipating that, he's planning for it, and he's thinking very carefully about what he can do to minimise that. That's a really good thing that an interviewer wants to hear, because that makes me confident that he's not going to be phased. If he does encounter some poor behaviour, which is very likely to happen, he's not going to be put off by it. He's going to react to it in a calm, in a positive and a confident way, which is really important. It also sounds like he's very keen to build positive relationships with his students. He's not just there screaming at them and keeping them in line. He's making sure that they enjoy their lessons. He talks about how engaging he likes his activities to be. And he related to my question. I mentioned that MFL is quite difficult for the students in my school. And I really liked that he talked about how he was going to build their confidence, again, through his positive praise, and really build them up and make them feel good about themselves in the lesson, rather than just managing them and keeping them quiet. That was a brilliant thing to hear. And I can tell from that answer that if he did encounter difficulties, that he would be willing to learn from those bad lessons. We all have bad days and bad lessons. The screen has just gone very dark as I say that. He would be looking to tweak things and make changes and plan for good behaviour, better behaviour in the following lessons. So it was a really encouraging answer. Thank you, Josh.
Pleasure.
Perfect. So yeah, as we said, because these are all very common questions, it's a really good idea to prepare for these. Obviously, you don't need to script an answer, but having some notes about really simple things that you do for behaviour is really important. So if it's common for you to have a seating plan, then that can be one of your notes that you make sure that you talk about if behaviour is mentioned. Often, people struggle to think of things because they're so obvious. The things that Josh mentioned, telling students they're doing a good job, having a seating plan, making sure there's always work for them to do. It's really straightforward stuff. He's not doing anything particularly special, but that's what the head teacher wants to hear, because the head teacher needs to know that you as a teacher understand that all of that is important for good behaviour. So you're just putting their mind at ease, you're just reassuring them that you know all of these things are important and that you do them every day. So it doesn't have to be anything particularly special, but you just need to know exactly all of those things that you do and have a mental list of them before the interview so that you can reel them off like Josh just did.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think that takes us on to question number 3.
I've got a question from
yes.
Rocchio there. When they observe us at the beginning, once we have started.
Yes, absolutely. So when you are, hopefully all of you, placed within schools in England, you'll be assigned a mentor. So mentors within schools on the SVTP programme are a point of contact in schools, and they'll pop in and out of your lesson to see how you're getting on. It's unlikely that the head teachers will come in and observe you unless it's a very formal occasion, because obviously they're very busy and they will have lots and lots of teachers that they might need to observe. So it might not be until later on in the term that you get someone very senior coming in to see your lessons. But you'll probably find that your mentor will pop in and see how you're getting along, not to judge you at all, but just to support you and make sure you have everything you need. But you're absolutely right. It is common that once you're in school, people will just come in to see how you're doing. I think in England, it seems compared to other countries, it's much more common for us to have our doors open and for other teachers to walk in quite frequently. Often schools have a policy of doing learning walks, which just means that senior teachers are walking around the school maybe once a week, popping into classrooms and just seeing that everything's going okay, that there's no silly behaviour happening, helping out where they can as well. So you might find that there's lots of people that pop in and out of your lessons. That's a really good point. Lovely. Okay, so yeah, I think question number 3.
Okay, question number 3. So I've been the head teacher at this school for a number of years, and I'm proud to say we have a very strong, committed staff body here. I understand that you will be probably interviewing and speaking to a number of different schools when you make a decision where you would like to go. So I want to know what interests you, Josh, about our school specifically.
Well, it's in a nice area. I want it somewhere near the coast, so that's great. I don't think there's any misbehaving kids, no rude kids, because you've got good Ofsted, and it's good pay. What was the pay again?
I see.
So, no, I don't think that was a particularly great answer from Josh there. So we'll go through a few things. Firstly, Josh didn't really mention anything about the school at all. Head teachers, particularly I think in England, where schools are really different going from school to school. You can have one school on the same road as another school and they feel completely different because the head teachers and the leadership of the school have a big impact on how the school is run, how the school feels, and all of those different policies and things that go into it make each school very individual and very separate from each other. So as a head teacher, Alex wants to hear why his school, because it will be very different from other schools that you might be interviewing at, other schools in the same area. So you don't need to compare one school to another, but you do need to show Alex that, or your interviewer, that you know all about their school and that you've done the research. So at the beginning, I know some of you joined us a little bit late, but I talked about how to research those things, so their Ofsted report, their website, and making sure that you've talked to Randstad about those things, because Randstad have contacts at the school. Sometimes they know the head teachers quite well, so it's really important that you use that. And if Randstad have organised an interview for you, get all the information you can, so that if they ask you that question, you're able to give a really good answer about why their school seems really like a good fit for you. The other thing in the question was that Josh was asking about his pay there, which was kind of unrelated to the question asked by Alex. First of all, at the end of an interview, head teachers always give you an opportunity for questions. So if you've got a burning question you really need to ask, don't worry, because there will be an opportunity for it at the end. So you don't need to try and ask questions throughout, because there's always an opportunity. Secondly, things like pay and contract, they can all be worked out with Randstad. That's what they're there for. So they can help you with that. So if you've got questions and things about pay and you don't want to ask those in the interview, because sometimes it can be a bit awkward, you can talk to Randstad about that, because they can have those conversations on your behalf and they can help you to understand those things as well. I'm sure some of you are already talking to them about that. So they're the two things there, really. What Alex really wants to know is what is special to Josh about his school. It doesn't have to be something that makes it unique, but it's just got to be something good about the school that's attracted Josh to it, and that makes Josh feel like, yeah, that's a good school for me, it's a good fit, and I want to be a part of that. So take two. Let's try again.
Okay, Josh. So what interests you about becoming a member of staff at our school?
Well, I'm really excited to be part of your MFL department. I know they get really good results. Last year it was 81% at GCSE pass rate. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my experience, but also learning from your colleagues and trying to improve that pass rate together as part of a team. I also love the community feel of your school. You do a lot of trips, but also get a lot of visitors and parents involved, especially with the local community. And I noticed that your year tends to do a music festival every year. I play the guitar, so I would love to get involved with that. If there's any other extracurricular activities I could do, either with music or Spanish or otherwise, I'd love to get involved, because I think those parts of the wider school community are what really makes a school special for the children.
Thank you, Josh. Brilliant. So that second answer from Josh was much more encouraging for me as the head teacher. He showed me that he is a team player. He wants to make a difference and make improvements within the MFL department. He has clear knowledge of the community within the school and the extracurricular things that we have going on in the wider school community. And he sounded very, very enthusiastic and very, very keen to get involved and to help out and to just be a part of the school. That tells me that Josh isn't going to be the sort of teacher that runs out of the door at 3:15, and I'd never see him throughout the week, and he stays in his classroom and does his lessons, and then he's off. He sounds like he really wants to make the most of the experience. He's clearly researched my school because he will have found that information on the internet, on the website. So that makes me feel really good that he is so interested. He's done his research, and he sounds like he really wants to be a part of the team that I'm building as the head teacher, which is going to be something I feel very passionate about. I'm going to want somebody who's a good fit for the rest of the team, who's going to get on with everybody, and who's going to make a positive difference in the new school year. And Josh made me feel confident in that, in his answer. So nice one. Thank you.
Lovely. So yeah, as we've said before, make sure you do research that specific school. Just a few bullet points. Like I said, it doesn't have to be anything that's unique to that school. It just has to be something that you liked about it, that stood out. Lots of schools do extracurricular activities. Lots of schools have parents involved. So nothing Josh said was very specific about that one school, but it was clear to Alex that he'd done his research, and that's what we're trying to show, and we're trying to show our enthusiasm for being a part of that. Lovely. So, next question.
Okay, Josh. I want you to imagine that at the end of the school day, a student comes to you. They're visibly upset. They're on the verge of crying. You can see that they're quite upset about something, and they make a disclosure to you. They tell you something that's happening at home, which is concerning to you. The student also then asks you to keep that a secret because they're very upset about it. What should you do in that situation?
Well, obviously that would be really upsetting to me as well, for one of my students to be having a bad experience and being upset. So I'd probably get them in my classroom, get them sat down, comfort them, and of course I keep their secret because I wouldn't want to upset them even further if that's what they wanted. If they wanted me to keep a secret, I'd say yes, because I wouldn't want them to get in trouble or more upset, and help them out in any way I could, maybe letting them off their homework that week, walking them to the school gate, anything like that.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Okay. So, no.
Let's go.
Yeah, Josh didn't get the job. So,
Red flag.
all joking aside, there's usually always a safeguarding question in interviews. And the reason for that is because it's part of the head teacher or interviewer's job to do safer recruitment. So that's a policy. It's a part of interviewing people and hiring them into schools. So part of the interview process has to be checking that that person understands safeguarding procedures. Now, from the answer that Josh gave, it's going to be quite clear to me and Alex that Josh is not aware of safeguarding procedures. And actually, even if Josh had given a fantastic interview until this point, he still might not get the job. Unfortunately, he has to make sure that he's safeguarding the children, and that is the number one priority, because if the children aren't safe, then none of us are doing our jobs correctly. So it sounds like, you know, a silly little end question, but actually it's really, really important that you make sure you know exactly what you're going to say if a head teacher asks you about this. I know lots of people that have missed out on jobs in the past when we've supported other international teachers because they just haven't understood what to do. So it's really quite straightforward, and there's a few areas that Josh needs to touch on in his answer that he'll give you in a moment. But the main issues with his answer were that, one, he wasn't being particularly professional about that situation. So he was acting more as a friend than a teacher. And that is not what the children need from us. And although we need to show that we care, at the end of the day, we have to maintain our level of professionalism. And that's what the school expect from us. So that was one of the problems. And the other problem was that Josh is actually not doing his job properly because he's not reporting things that he's meant to report. So Alex will go through the steps after Josh's good answer in a moment, but it's really key that you do mention the reporting procedures, because if you're not making reports about these things, then students might be at risk and we're not supporting them properly. So we're going to have that question asked again, and Josh is going to give us a pretty standard response. It's really important that you know your standard response so you can give that too.
So, Josh, at our school, the well-being of students and their safeguarding is always at the forefront of our minds. I would like to know if a student approached you and made a disclosure, which you felt was quite concerning, and they asked you to keep it a secret, what would you do in that situation?
The first thing I would do is I would reassure them, but then also tell them that I can't promise to keep it a secret in case I need to inform another adult about it to make sure that they're safe, really. If they were talking to me, I would make sure I didn't ask any leading questions. I would ask them if I could write it down, what they were saying. If not, then I would write it up immediately afterwards. And whatever they had told me, I would send that in writing straight away to the designated safeguarding lead, whoever that may be, at the school.
Brilliant. Okay. That answer was very, very good. It was succinct. It was professional, and he ticked all the boxes that I need to hear as a head teacher to feel confident that Josh knows his stuff on safeguarding policy and he knows the procedures that is standard across all schools in England to follow. So he mentioned that he cannot keep a secret, even if a student asks him to. He has to say that he may need to speak with other adults to make sure that the team are doing everything they can to keep that student safe. He mentioned that he would not ask any leading questions. He would just sensitively and calmly take in the information given from the student and record it factually, okay, without emotions, without unnecessary detail, just the facts of what he's been disclosed by the student. And he mentions that he's immediately going to, or as soon as possible, he's going to refer that in writing, so a written report, to the designated safeguarding lead within the school. So those three things: not keeping a secret, noting down the information factually as it's said by the student, and reporting it to the safeguarding lead or safeguarding officer within school, is exactly the three things that I need to hear to know that he knows what to do in that situation.
Perfect. I think you guys have all done safeguarding training anyway, so you probably know these steps, but it is important that you know that you probably will be asked about this in your interview in some form or another. These things are phrased differently, but you'll probably be able to tell if it's something about safeguarding. Usually it's about professional conduct, but it's always really the same answer, no matter what the scenario is. You just need to make sure that you're being professional and recording, as Alex has just said. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our little role play interview. We're going to be wrapping up in the next few minutes. So if you do have questions that you've not already typed, or that we've managed to miss somehow, because there are a lot of things in there, then pop them in the box. Also, if you haven't said hi, just type in the word hi so that we know who's here, because I can see there's 24 of you, but I'm not sure that we've got 24 names. So just so I can take a little register of who's been watching, so we know who we need to send the link out to in case they've missed it. And whilst you guys are writing questions or saying hi, if you've not done already, I'll just kind of sum everything up for you. And you will be able to watch a link to this at any time. So you can rewatch it, you can skip through bits that are boring, get to the bits that are useful, and hopefully that will help you prepare for your interviews, along with your interview handbook that we've sent out, and I'll send it again at the end of this. So in conclusion, make sure you prepare for your Skype interview itself, so with good internet connection, your laptop, and the software that you need and everything, and your Skype name. Make sure you've not got a silly Skype name. And make sure you prepare for the actual interview. So looking at the school's website, their Ofsted reports, and asking Randstad, like we've said previously, for all that information. I know sometimes you don't have very long to prepare for the interview. Sometimes it's quite a quick turnaround because schools this time of year are very busy. So they might only give you a day or so, maybe 2-3 days to prepare. You can speak to Randstad about that, but you need to be ready so that you know all the things you should be preparing as soon as you know that you've got an interview at a school. And that brings me on to the next step, which is obviously preparing those real life examples, making notes of things that you want to bring up in the interview. Even if you don't have an interview lined up yet, there's no harm in getting all those things ready, because as I said, it might be quite quick that the school would like to speak to you, and you don't want to be stressed and panicked. You want to be nice and calm on the day. So make sure that you're doing what you can now to prepare, so that hopefully when you get an interview at your perfect school, you're already completely prepared for it and it's all nice and calm and relaxed. Make sure that, again, you kind of talking to Randstad, getting all those things in the same place and that you're all ready for it. And if you need anything at all, you can contact us, you can contact Randstad because they know the schools. But we're here now, the support started. I mentioned the Facebook group, the emails that we're sending out and all the handbooks that we've sent. And finally, the online course that we've got, that again, I'll send the link to in the email summing up this webinar, is really helpful because it covers a lot of the aspects of a Skype interview. So although it's about generally teaching in the UK, that course covers all the key aspects that we've been through today as well. So you can just test your knowledge. I think about half of you have already done that anyway, so thank you so much if you've already done that. Don't worry if you haven't, but it will help. So do pop along to the online course, do that as well, and we can send you a certificate and everything for your records once you've finished. So unless there's anything else, I guess it's question time. So
yeah, I can see a few questions have come up. So we have one here from Rothio, which says, when reporting safeguarding issues, do we always have to report it to the designated safeguarding person, or can we tell our mentor as well?
So it is always the designated safeguarding lead, and the reason for that is because we want to get that really important information exactly where it needs to go straight away. We don't want to be passing messages between people, and it's everybody's responsibility to report it directly. Because if I was to report it to Josh and Josh was to report it to somebody else, some of the information might get missed. It's also your responsibility. If you're an employee in that school, you have to make that report, okay? Your mentor can definitely support you with it. If you need help writing that up, of course they can. Josh and I are both designated safeguarding leads for Prospero, so don't report it to us because we don't know the students, but if you're in school and you need help with any of that, all of us are totally fine to help you with that. If you've got a report and you need to write it up, we can help you to write that up if you give us a call when you're in school. That's what we're here for. So any of those things, don't feel like you're on your own with it. It's not a big stressful thing. Just ask for help. If your mentor's not free, give us a call and we can help you with that in school. So nothing to worry about, but it does need to come from you.
Great, and that links to a second question from Rosa, who says, when you said record the facts about a safeguarding concern from a student, what do we mean by record?
Yes. Okay. So we certainly don't mean.
Yeah. Don't take them.
No.
Don't record exactly what they're saying. It just means writing down, making quick notes about the details of exactly what's happened and what's gone on, the concern that the student has, and then that will form your written report to the designated safeguarding lead. So when I said record, I mean record written down.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Certainly don't need to record the students. That would probably be a safeguarding concern in itself. So yes, definitely just written notes is absolutely fine. Thank you for that.
Great, and we have a question from Gabriella, who says, as some schools have already started interviewing, but some haven't, how can we know for sure that the process of interviewing is being done for all of them?
So I think the process of interviewing the schools, it's always a bit difficult this time of year, because in the UK, we have certain times of the year when teachers are able to hand in their notice, their resignation. So sometimes schools won't know that they have a vacancy to fill until later on in the year. And that's why some of them haven't started recruiting yet, because they're not sure if someone's going to be staying or if they're going to be going. So that's the reason that some of them won't have started yet, because they're not sure, and they don't want to recruit too many teachers because they would never want to let anyone down and say, oh, actually, we don't need you. So that's one of the reasons that they haven't started recruiting. If there's certain schools within the programme that you like the look of, but you're not sure about it yet, that would be something to talk to Randstad about. So effectively, Prospero's part, our part in the programme, starts when you have been placed. Obviously, we're absolutely fine to help you guys from now, because not all of you have placements yet. But our big part of this starts after you're placed in schools. We're running the big training event in the summer, and then we support you throughout the year. So Randstad are probably the best people to speak to about specific schools if you've got somewhere particular that you're thinking about. But that's why some schools haven't started yet, because it might be that they're involved in the programme, but they don't know whether they have a vacancy, or it might be that they're just sorting out what subject they do. Because languages aren't dictated as to which languages the school teaches, the school might be trying to decide whether they teach Spanish for A-level next year, or whether they're just doing French or just German, for example. And those decisions are all happening at the moment. Because there's those decisions going on, you will find some schools do start interviewing later. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that. But you'll find there's lots of schools interviewing now. So do speak to Randstad, keep in touch with them. I know that they'll be emailing you guys a lot at the moment, and they'll be phoning individuals and talking to you. But if you've not heard from them in a little while, pop them an email across and get in touch. I'm sure they'll be able to help. I hope that answers that one.
Yeah, and that also answers Gabriella's second question, I believe. She says that when a school wants to interview us, do they write to us or email, or is it Randstad who writes to us? And as Ellen said, it will be all through Randstad. So they will get in touch with you when they feel that there's a good fit there and they feel that they want to put you forward for an interview. So yeah, just if you haven't heard from them in a little while, as Ellen said, pop them a message, give them a call, Randstad that is, and just see, remind them of what you're looking for, remind them what you're really keen, which area you're really keen to be based in, and just keep the communication going through Randstad.
Yeah, it makes it nice and easy because it means that Randstad can arrange the time of the interview, make sure the school Skype details are correct, things like that. So it's all a lot smoother when it goes through Randstad.
Yeah. We have a question which says, is there any handbook, website, or something to know the difference between schools, academies that work in England? Because it's quite confusing. We agree, it can be quite confusing.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. It is a bit of a tricky system. I think that we put a little bit in the SVTP teacher handbook. Now, the reason we've not put loads in there is because, as I mentioned earlier, every school is very individual. So just because one school is an academy, one school is a free school, one school is a faith school, they're all very different anyway. So I think all three of us have worked at both academies and schools that are just not academies, but all of our academies would have been completely different from each other. Yeah. So don't be thinking, oh, I only want to work in this type of school. The best thing to do is when a school has an opportunity, has a vacancy, is to research that specific school and see about that. It's the same thing with Ofsted reports. Just because a school says it's got a certain rating on Ofsted, that doesn't tell you all that much about what it's like to work in the school. So just because a school has a certain rating, you shouldn't assume that it's a specific way, because every school is different. The best way of finding out is to go on the school's website, have a look on Google, have a look at some reviews for that school. Loads of schools have Google reviews now, so you can have a little look at that. Have a look at parent forums and things. Have a look at their, there's lots and lots of ways that you can research the school online, and that will give you a better, well-rounded vision as well as the Ofsted report. Obviously, that's the official grading of the school. It's really important that you look at it, but it's not the only place to go, just like you shouldn't make assumptions based on what type of school it is. So, sorry, we can't come with more information. It is a bit confusing, and it's because all the schools are quite different from each other. So I think that's probably where the confusion arises.
But we can cover the basic differences between the different types in the future webinar, and definitely at the residential. When you get based.
Yeah.
I can see a question here from Amalio, which will be a good one for Josh to answer. It says, some schools offer roles as a head of MFL department. What does this imply on top of the responsibilities of a class teacher?
Okay, so I was head of a department, not MFL, but geography. And you will have a normal teaching timetable, so you'll still be a classroom teacher, but you may have 1 or 2 extra free preparation periods. But you'll be responsible for a lot of things. So you'll be responsible for the curriculum of that subject. So ultimately, you're responsible for all the MFL staff that will be working underneath you. You will be responsible for their development, their line management. You'll be responsible for all the data reporting for the department. So you'll have to compile reports of what is going on, what the teaching is like. You often have to observe the teachers as well. So every half term, I would go and observe the other geography teachers, and I would check that their lessons were to a standard that I'd expect. And if they weren't, I would have to put things in place to make sure that they were mentored and trained up to make sure they were teaching the lessons to standard that I wanted. You're in charge of the curriculum, so making sure all the topics are taught in the right amount of time. And ultimately, which is probably the most scariest bit, you're responsible for the exam grades. So the results that come through at GCSE and at A-level, you are responsible for those numbers. And so that's probably one of your biggest priorities of the head of department, is making sure, scary face.
That's the emoji.
That is the perfect emoji that sums up being
That's the head of department emoji.
It's really rewarding. I loved it because I loved getting involved, and I had loads of aspects of my job that I really, really enjoyed. And I helped turn a tiny failing department into something that I was really, really proud of. But it is a lot of hard work. It is a lot of hard work. So if you're prepared for that, great. But I don't necessarily suggest it if you also want time to enjoy and travel around the UK and have free times on your weekend. Because you have to put a lot of your own free time into it. So I would be quite wary of that. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, I think particularly in your first year as well, when you're getting used to it, if you're taking on responsibility like that, you do have to appreciate that you are going to have to put in a lot of a time commitment to making that work. And that might be because you're staying on and you're setting that up. But you have to be aware that those responsibilities do come with a big time commitment as well.
Yeah, cool. Attilia asks, do Randstad send the offers to all of us, or do they have a specific number of people they pass the offers on to? Now, we're not 100% sure on the inner workings of Randstad and how they make their placements, but I'm pretty sure that they will use the information that you've given them at the assessment centre and through interview, and when you've told them about your preferences of year group, of teaching, of area around the country, of size of city, of all of those preferences that you've given them, they will use that to make placements and to match you up with schools. So if you feel like your preferences have changed slightly, or you want to update Randstad or just catch up with them, then again, I would approach them directly and just let them know exactly what you're after, to make sure that they keep you in mind, in the forefront of their mind, when those opportunities from schools show up.
Yeah, Randstad do have quite close relationships with head teachers and with senior staff in the schools. So that's why we're not sure about the schools right now, because they're the ones that are talking to them all the time. And a big part of Randstad's job is making sure that it's a good match between the school and you guys. You've never been to the school, and Randstad know a lot about them. So they are fitting people together and trying to find places that's going to work really well for you and make sure that you have a really successful term. I think hopefully we'll find roles for everybody. So fingers crossed that you'll be one